October 18th Park Trails and Lakes Commission meeting. Jamie, do you want to do roll call?
Chair Steenblock.
Here.
Commissioner Miller.
Here.
Commissioner Ramseth.
Here.
Commissioner Steenblock.
Here.
Commissioner Moorhead.
Here.
Commissioner Geyer.
Here.
Commissioner Gary.
All right. Next on the agenda is looking for approval of tonight's agenda.
And Chair and members of the commission, we do have somebody here for agenda item 5B. So if we
Okay.
could possibly consider an amendment to the agenda to put that first, switch that to Shadow Creek Parkland dedication recommendation as 5A. That would be appreciated.
With approval of the agenda with the correction moving Shadow Creek up to 5A.
Second.
So we have a motion and a second. Do we have any discussion? Hearing no discussion, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? And abstain. All right, so that motion carries. Jamie, I don't see anybody for open forum, but do we have any written in comments?
We do not have any open forum submissions for this evening.
All right, so then we will move on to 5A, which is the Shadow Creek Parkland dedication.
Todd Christensen of Elm Creek Vistas LLC has submitted an application for a planned unit development, preliminary plat, rezoning, and comprehensive plan amendment to develop the property at 6150 202nd Street North. It'll be a mixed density residential development. Can I take this really quick? For commissioners and those just maybe watching from home, the city does have what's called a parkland dedication ordinance. Whenever anybody is proposing to subdivide land, they are subject to dedicating a portion of that subdivision. Is it showing up here? It should in just a second here.
Now it is.
When they are looking to subdivide land, a portion of that land would be dedicated for public purposes, public parkland purposes. Underneath this scenario, the developer is not proposing to dedicate land for public purposes. Instead, he is proposing to pay a fee in lieu of land dedication. This is not an uncommon request for the city. In evaluating the request, we look to see what is within the vicinity of the neighborhood, what would be a reasonable park or distance for residents of this neighborhood to actually get to parkland. So one of the things that we've looked at in this request is the proximity of the site to Southview Park. I understand that right now doesn't have a lot of improvements, but however, the developer is also proposing by easement a trail through the development that would connect this site with that park. Fee in lieu of land dedication is a restricted fund that can only be used for new things. So new parkland acquisition, new improvements to a park. So in these circumstances where you have an adjacent park, the funding for the fee in lieu could be used for adjacent park features. One of the things noted in the staff report is the trails proposed, this green trail connection to Southview Parks being proposed at this time, at the same time that public infrastructure would be added. The developer is not proposing to put in this kind of southeasterly from the new roadway to the Good View Trail at this time. He's indicated that that would have come at a later date. Staff has indicated that we think that the trail should be put in all at one time, just for that connectivity component, not only for the entire residents, but also for that neighborhood to have a small circular path through there. The park dedication requirements, when we were looking at the feasibility, as we've talked about, and the need for parks, the park chapter of the comprehensive plan does call for a park to be established, or 2 parks to be established, each about within a mile of the vicinity, not necessarily directly at this site. But we have been able to determine that the city is at a deficit for parkland. There's a need for parkland, so even the parkland dedication would help us maybe acquire additional property in the future. So looking at the request, staff finds that the fee in lieu of land dedication is appropriate. It conforms to the city code requirements. I have recommendations for you tonight to recommend to the city council to accept parkland fee in lieu of land dedication, and also to recommend to the city council that the trails be developed during the first phase, and that the city would acquire easement for those trails prior to the release of building permits for the site.
What was the percentage again of the dedication fee? It was in the document.
Sure. So standard dedication for 6 units per acre is 10% of the land area. And then it goes up 1% every additional density unit per acre. So this is an average 10 units per acre for the whole entire site. And so it would be, 10. So it would be 14%. This would actually then equate to 14% of the fair market value of the property would be the estimated land dedication requirement.
You don't have that at this time?
No, there are a few little tweaks to that. It is a calculation that we have to look at a case-by-case basis. When it comes down to it, I'm hesitant to put that dollar number in place until the actual development agreement is in place, because if that dollar switches or if the developable land or the acreage should change in some way, the development should change, it can kind of lock us in prematurely.
Mr. Chairman, I also did not get the additional email, and so I have not been able to look at this, but am I mixed up on, there's another plot over there off of 202, is this a different one than we've been talking about?
This is.
Yes.
Okay, so this is a new one.
We're working right now on about 6 different subdivision developments. We have a couple on that, along that corridor through there.
So my only concern is in the past, when we've had recommendations come before us, we've at least known what the dollar amount was that we were recommending. And so it's, I guess, is this before us prematurely? Should we be waiting until we know what the dollar amount is in lieu of it and then make a determination? Because I feel like we don't have all the information to determine whether or not we would say it's land or money.
But it seems to me that there's a park right there. And so to
Yeah.
take land may not make much sense when we have undeveloped Southview Park right next to it. To have another park within the boundaries of this new development, I think we should develop Southview Park as opposed to having 2 parks next to each other.
I agree with you, but I don't know how much money it is. So we're making a motion to accept, we're making a recommendation that would go on to council without knowing all the details. So it just feels slightly irresponsible of us to make a recommendation to take cash in lieu of land when we don't even know what that is and what the impacts would be budget-wise.
I'll just note for the record, I didn't realize that it was had been a standard for the commission to recommend a dollar amount. Given that the policy exists, it generally just kind of follows that standard percentage. And so it was my error that you normally were recommending a dollar amount. I would discourage the commission from recommending a dollar amount on the basis that if something changed, if land got added or released, it could bind us in a way that could present some challenges just a little bit later down the road.
I don't know that we ever did it based on the exact dollar amount, but it gave us some weight to say this much land or this much money, knowing they both could shift somewhat versus really not having any clue. But I mean, I agree that we probably wouldn't put another park there.
I agree with you, Betty.
So I just have, oh, go ahead, sorry.
I think we used to have that $2,500 per part, per
Per parcel.
parcel, I suppose is a word, that gets redivided. It made it easy to go, but at the same rate, if we're looking at whether or not we're gonna get land or the dollars, and you're saying that the land would be, or the dollar value would be based on what the
The fair
donated
market
land,
value.
the fair market value of the land, I guess, and knowing we don't need land in that same spot, I guess I don't take that much issue with it.
Yeah, it seems to me that the amount will be what the amount will be. And whether we know it up front or at some later date, doesn't seem to make much difference.
As long as it stays in that 14% range.
Yeah. Or if it doesn't stay in the 14% range, it will still be what it's going to be.
I think just a quick comment as well. Previously, we did have the very calculated $2,500 per unit, and that was able to be calculated out by our former zoning administrator. So that did come forward in the staff memo. With this new process with parkland dedication determination and going off of fair market value, it's more difficult to have that up front. I think an important thing to remember with this is that trail development is an important recreation trail connection that is part of this requirement to meet that recreational need as well. So it's, even though we don't know the exact dollar amount today, we do have the trail connection to Southview Park. And as stated by our community development director, Abby, that we do have Southview already there, so.
So we're for sure going off of, because I was looking at when we originally approved the change. One of the things that was noted under the cash contribution was that it would be calculated by city council on an individualized basis pursuant to the fair market value, tax value, or other relevant data. So are we saying that for this particular one, it will be based off of the fair market value and nothing else, or?
Thus far, we've only done it based on fair market value. Generally, fair market value is greater than the assessed tax value of a property. Not always, but we have done that now for a number of developments in reviewing them, is looking at that fair market value as opposed to that tax value. I will say that Jamie is right that these are just a little bit more comprehensive review than before when we had that straight fee per unit. All of them right now, we are kind of having our attorneys really be at the forefront and the lead of those. The last one we had came in later than expected, but a big part of this is really making sure that we're staying not only compliant with our ordinance, but also that we're kind of staying ahead of the pending litigation that's out there regarding parkland dedication.
Any other discussion?
No, again, being this is the first time I'm looking at it on the screen right now, it's just, again, it's kind of a surprise that we have a new plot there, and I thought before too it came to us with, this is a description, this is what's going on, but in this case it just appeared. And so I have no problem, as they said, if we're gonna get money, we'll have to take the money anyway, and maybe we could put something or develop Southview so we have something at least close by to use it, so we can maybe use that money. But again, if we don't ever get to discuss these things, it's just a matter of, I don't know. But I'll be in favor of approving this particular one in this particular way.
Okay.
I agree with the recommendation on the completing the entire trail as opposed to having one phase and then the second phase.
Which I know more about it.
Was that a motion or no?
Here it is.
I'll move to recommend to the city council, the city accept parkland fee in lieu of land dedication for Shadow Creek Estates and require both trail connections established and public easements accepted prior to the city's release of a building permit for any structure aside from a model home.
Second?
So we have a motion and we have a second. Do we have any other discussion? Hearing no other discussion, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Aye. And abstain? All right, motion carries. All right, so that motion carried, so we move on to 5B, which is Belt's master plan update.
All right, I'm just gonna get this up on the screen
Yeah,
here for
question.
you.
Looking like he had a question. Oh, he did, okay.
All right, so can everyone see that up on their screen?
Yes.
Yep.
All right, so tonight we have on the agenda a staff memo provided that Abby and I put together, and we'll go over an update here shortly. I just wanted to note that this was addressed to city council as well. We brought this to city council just as a workshop item last night for them to ask any questions per their request. City council wanted that at their workshop last evening. Just again, the conversation from council workshop last night was an update on the new phased approaches that we'll talk about, and hopefully Abby will be here to guide that portion, and then additionally kind of where we're going. So just kind of go through a quick update. As you guys all know, kind of the process we've been through, we have been through the process. We did apply for the Minnesota Outdoor Recreation Grant and found out in June that we were selected for that project. And just recently, the National Park Service sent over a final draft agreement for us, which I did include in the packet. So that kind of concludes that process of being formally accepted for that grant. That will be something that will need formal recommendation for approval through city council. With that said, the only major change that we talked about last night was just staff has looked at the phasing of this project, and from a budget standpoint, site constraints, how do we reconstruct the courts most efficiently? So Abby had put together some new phasing recommendations with her planning background of how we can do that without disrupting the site more than we need to. So included in the agenda packet here is for discussion tonight. I'll turn it over to Abby just in a minute because she put this part together here to kind of go through the new phased approach, which would still allow us to meet our grant deadlines of June 30th of 2024 for completing the grant project. But then this also just allows us to save some financials on doing all the site grading at one time, and really helps to navigate the project most cost effectively. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Abby, if you don't mind kind of walking through the new phases and kind of how you got to this point.
So the one thing that was, as we started to work on that scope for engineering services, construction management with Bolton and Mink, it was really determined that the basketball court and tennis court needed to be reconstructed. If we're redeveloping the entire park, resurfacing those facilities wouldn't have the longevity that the rest of the park would have, and we'd end up having to get back in there at some point. It really bound kind of the jigsaw puzzle, so to say, in just redevelopment of the site. Additionally, the site grading, the stormwater is all kind of interdependent with one another, and so doing those on the onset in all phases together really helps reduce the conflicts that we would have later down the road in having to tear up one half than the other half. So in this three-phase approach, what we would look at is next fall, removing all of the fences, doing all site grading, stormwater improvements, removing the ball fields, and constructing all walkway stairs and ramps, and getting ready for that 2 to 12-year-old playground. Full reconstruction of the basketball courts and tennis courts would also be done at that time, and that would also be, I think the tennis courts would be striped for pickleball, I believe is discussed as well. And then restoring that turf. That really allows then 1 full year as well for the site to settle and those ball fields to be prepped at a later date. It's my understanding that that is really an integral thing when it comes to ball field development. So year 2, that would be spring of 2024, we would come in and put in that 2 to 12 playground, the equipment that we received the grant for, and that would fulfill the obligations associated with that grant. Then also the building would be installed at that time. Then the spring of 2025, we'd come in and remove the 512 playground, put in the 13 plus playground, finish off the ball fields, and restore the rest of the site. Part of this plan really allows for keeping one playground at the site open through the entire construction. So 23 and 24, the 512 playground would stay in place. Then 25, the 512 playground would be removed, but we'd have that 212 playground in place. Really making sure that that neighborhood doesn't lose the amenity at any point during construction. It also really allows us a little bit more time to figure out the financing of the project. So in the kind of two-phase approach of the project with $2.2 million, the city looked at a 10-year projection of the park's fund. And during that time, with Belts Park being a two-phase project, the park dedication fund would have gone into the red. And so spanning this out helps remain some solvency, even though that park dedication fund balance in 2025 gets low. These are based on a couple of different factors. One is a $50,000 tax contribution each year, which is what ended up in the capital improvement plan this year. The other one would be an assumed $75,000 contribution to park dedication funds from the development community. Just to give you a rough estimate, we are working on one development that, their park contribution, we're estimating that it could come in at about $225,000. So that fund balance is likely to increase as we see more development coming in the next probably 3 to 5 years. Really, when it comes down to it, the biggest reason that this three-phased approach was really to make sure we could help keep some solvency, as well as keep that playground, that neighborhood asset open, but really making sure that that whole park was going to be redeveloped in one, and it's hard to say one fell swoop. We weren't able to finance the project in one fell swoop, but being able to do it so that half the park didn't get developed and another part of it gets left for a while.
So with that being said, we can answer any questions. There's an opportunity to discuss any questions you guys have. Some of our next steps and that were talked about, we do have an agreement with Bolton and Mank for professional services. So they would do the final design and construction management, and then we will also have the DNR grant agreement. That those are two items that we'll need eventually when we're ready to do so, the approval, and go to city council for recommended approval. So with that, does anyone have any questions?
I just note really,
Go ahead.
I just want to note really quick that the agreement for professional services with Bolton and Mink is a part of the total project cost. It's not an add-on cost to the development of the park.
Is that included in the first year's costs?
They're phased. There would be phased costs, so we would end up paying those as the project is commences.
Okay.
Betty?
Just two things kind of jumped out. One was, we had recommended or thought that a big improvement would be the building, just because you can use it for the skating and whatever. And so now we see that as phase, what is it, two? Two. So just wondering what caused that change. And then the other question was, I know at one point we talked about the importance maybe of fencing, at least on two sides, because this park, unlike many of our others, are on two very busy streets. And I see us taking out the fencing, but I don't see us putting it back in. So just wondering where that landed.
So with regard to the building, rising construction costs have brought that estimated cost of that building in much greater than I think we thought it would be. Part of that second year is one to help offset those costs, because the site grading, the stormwater, all that year one is a pretty expensive. It's $800,000 right in that first one. If we would have added in the building, we would have been looking at probably a 1 point something, or maybe 4, just to help kind of phase that cost, spread that cost out so our fund balance doesn't dip too low. The other thing is a building of that nature in a park is a really great opportunity for potential private donation. And so it would allow between now and spring of 2024, potentially for this commission staff to seek a private donor to maybe help offset that cost for the project.
What about the fencing?
The fencing, I don't think was a part of the master plan, so Jamie could maybe speak to that.
Sure. Bolton and Mank didn't have it pictured in the master plan. It is listed as a line item in our cost analysis, so it should be included in here, and I'll just verify that. But they did have a fencing cost in that overall cost analysis.
And I'm worried about
And I'll
that
verify.
house that lived at poor greenhouse right there too. If we take that fence out, we're gonna have the same problem we have with Bayview.
We would not be removing the perimeter fence on the west side at all. The fence that is on the west side of the site, we do not
Okay,
intend
so
to
it would just be
remove
the
at
other,
all.
because you need to be able to get in
We need to be
there
able to
and
get
do
into the
construction.
site, yeah.
Yeah, I get that.
Right, and
Okay.
then currently, the fencing that we would remove is not ADA compliant, it's not the appropriate width as well, so I will verify, but I
Okay.
remember there was a fencing cost listed in the overall cost analysis.
Okay, thanks.
And then we are gonna be keeping the bleachers, the aluminum bleachers and all that stuff. That's gonna just continue on to the next, to the new Belts Park,
Ball field?
or the ball fields.
I think so, and I mean, we haven't gotten to that granular level of detail, but if they're still in good condition and can still serve that need, we can certainly
Yep.
keep those. I think those are easy to move out of the way during any construction.
And we still are of the mind that we're not gonna irrigate this ball field, right? That's not in the cost.
I do believe irrigation was included in the concept that we would want to have the ball field as part of just the standard ball field. But I think the conversation had been of keeping this a community ball field and that it wouldn't be eligible for park reservation or part of any sort of standardized programming.
I just have to say, I feel like nobody has listened to this commission at all. I'm irritated, and I have to speak for a second, I'm sorry. But we have had this thing in front of us umpteen million times
For how many years?
for multiple years in a row. We have made recommendations that, and one of the things in particular that we talked about was the irrigation, and said that it wasn't necessary, that it was a community park. It didn't need to be up to standards that were used by ball teams like Fenway. We talked about resurfacing. We talked about, we're looking at a plan that went before the city council, before we had an opportunity to even weigh in on it, see it, understand it, ask questions. We're looking at a plan that didn't consider several of the recommendations that this commission made. We're looking at a plan that is coming before us that is, what we talked about was the things that were within the grant, which was that playground equipment. We talked about the walkways and the ramps, and we talked about that building, and that building being a critical piece of it. And that's out several years. I don't understand why we're not looking at this and doing what was included in the grant. I don't understand why it went in front of city council before it came here. I don't understand why this commission doesn't get listened to as far as their feedback goes. And so here we sit again. I don't know, maybe I'm the only one that is frustrated by this. But here we sit again, talking about this. And since that time, we are now sitting in a time where we are looking at inflation of over 8%. We're looking at taxpayers of Forest Lake who have had significant property tax increases. We are looking at a change in the park dedication fees, which has reduced the amount that we're getting for park dedication fees. We're looking at our budget being reduced, because if you watch the meeting from September 19th, Patrick, one of the first things Patrick says, within 7 minutes of that meeting, is that we do not have a long-term plans or sustainable funding stream for the parks. And that, again, remember, that was one of the city's key strategies, was the importance of parks. So we have dedication funds that are reduced. We're looking at a time of potentially recessions, and we know what that does to the park dedication funds. We have no other funds that we get other than this $50,000, because as Patrick said, the $450,000 isn't sustainable year over year. So why do you need this commission? I guess, why do you need us? Because half the time we're disregarded, we're worked around, we're caught off guard. So I guess, furthermore, I can't get to your numbers here for 2023. Your projected revenue, is that the full amount of our budget? Because your revenue and your expenditures don't match your fund balance for that first year. And I guess I go back to, we applied for a grant for $300,000, which included that building, that playground equipment, and those walkways. So do that, and if you want to do more, then why don't you make a recommendation to city council to figure out how they fund it? Until then, that's what I think is within scope.
Just one thing to add, because I'm, I'm extremely frustrated. How many times have I asked to have a budget brought to us? I have no idea. We always hear the fund balance is not gonna be good, the fund balance might be good, depending on, we don't have a budget. I don't know if I'm the only one here that could not tell you right now how much we have in parklet dedication funds. I know it was brought up a while ago, but I said, can't we do a budget update every meeting? Oh, that's right, we haven't had a meeting for a number of months. But had we had meetings, it would have been good to have that information. So when I'm listening to you say, of course, that we were all in unison, as was the community, that the first thing would be that building. And so if I knew, other than just talk, about what the finances are, but I just feel so much in the dark about what it is we're doing and what the changes are and why we're not brought, and why I don't have that budget every single meeting. Not a full-fledged budget, but just an update on where our funds are, so that we can look at this and decide, yeah, maybe that isn't such a good idea. Councilwoman Kathy also mentioned last night, had we looked at anything about help from the school with the building? Has that been even in part of the discussion? It was in the beginning, but maybe that's not feasible. But when we don't know and we don't hear, then I get frustrated, because I have no idea what's going on.
Well, we're depleting our funds. If you look at this proposal, we will have $120,000 at the end of this project. And you think about, you know, one of the other things is, look at our maintenance. All of us on this commission went out and looked at parks. Those parks and that land and that equipment is a capital improvement investment. And some of them, excuse my language, look like shit. The maintenance is horrible on some of those. And we've taken pictures and we've provided input on that. There needs to be money reinvested in preserving that capital equipment. And this, with these significant adjustments to this project, you're completely depleting the funds again. So we're back to where we were, well, where we've always been. We've never had money to do anything. We've had how many plans that we've had? I mean, I can pull them out of this notebook, right? How many plans we've had that we're gonna do these parks, and we've listed the parks and the years and the equipment and we've never done anything with any of those. For the amount of time that I've been on this commission, the only thing we did was Lakeside Memorial. I don't know, Mr. Steenblock, you've been the longest member of this. What have we done?
Excuse me, I'm
Oh,
older
yes.
and, older and
So
longest.
I'll ask my two bookends. What have we gotten done? We've had
Okay,
plans.
do you mind if I kind of go back to our topic here so we can kind of keep moving forward? I just wanted to kind of take one little step back. The last time we looked at the plan, we had the 2 phases, and I did reiterate last night to council that it's always been the priority to construct the building and the playground, and our goal was improve the accessibility within the park, and that kind of stemmed the grant process. So that's what we applied for in the grant, and we're selected for that project. As part of the master plan, when we started looking at everything, the court reconstruction, we did talk internally as staff, can we do a sport court overlay? Can we, just fix the cracks? We looked at some options and talked with Public Works, and the staff recommendation is really they do need to be reconstructed. And unfortunately, that comes at a big cost to fully remove them, do all the grading, and do them right so that they aren't continuing to crack. They are a safety concern at this time. Mm-hmm. So as we worked through the process, things just do have a cost to them. When we as a commission last saw the master plan, nothing has changed on that. We had the phase 1, which was the right portion of the park with the pavilion and the playground. Phase 2 was gonna be the reconstruction of the basketball tennis courts with the ball field. That was the plan, with some changes in some of the financials, that I was projecting, the $450,000 in a couple of years. With that change, in addition to Abby's planning expertise and the phasing and the construction process, that really had us look closer at the staging, order of operations essentially of how we can do this most efficiently. And so that's where it is now the 2 phases over 3 years. With the last plan, our goal was initially construction of the new playground and pavilion in fall of 2023, you know, by the time we had everything. So just moving it to the spring of 2024 really isn't, in my opinion, a significant timeline change. We'll get through that winter season and we'll be able to still come in 2024 in the spring to put that in. I know that overall, it is an expensive project and we have the limited funding, so I think the question for the Parks Commission, and I think, you know, kind of brought up a little bit last night, is, you know, how do we feel about that investment into Belts Park? You know, is that $2 million? I will say we'll talk about later the master plan updates. We did do some recent surveying, and Belts Park, I think, was our number 3 or 4 most utilized parks in the community. A lot of strong feedback still for restrooms, pavilion, picnic space, improved playgrounds. So I think we really still are meeting the community need. There was a lot of interest in sport amenities as well, and athletic facilities. So that's just kind of, you know, I think where we've been and some of the factors that have kind of altered plans a little bit over the last few months while we've waited for our final approval on the grant. So
I might add that we did talk about the reconstructing of those courts, because as Jason and I can tell you, they've been dangerous for a long time. So in my mind, that was included, that from the very beginning, that we were going to have to take them out and start all over
Yes.
in order to save them.
we did have that conversation. Internally, we did just kind of brainstorm, are there any other more cost-effective ways to improve them? But as staff, we just agreed that they really, to do them right and really improve them with a long-term, you know, less maintenance, a better maintenance plan moving forward, is just to reconstruct them. However, that was gonna initially be phase 2, and that
As
is
staff,
changed.
how did you fund this? So when you had this conversation, how did you fund it?
Through the park dedication funds and then the projected funds that we're anticipating or we're gonna request or ask for through the general fund.
So when I look at 2023, so we've requested funds several years in a row, and I know last year we had the flip for the 450,000, but that's not sustainable. We don't have a long-term solution for funds. When I look at 2023, what is missing to me is what is our total fund right now? And is this the projected revenue and the expenditures coming to the 1.25 million? How are we getting there? What's the figure that's missing when we look at that? There's a figure missing there.
So what you're requesting is what would be the fund balance as the beginning of 2023?
So, yeah, how did you get to the 1.2 million?
It took the existing, you are correct in that the figure that is missing is the 2023 starting fund balance.
So is the 2023 starting fund balance 1.246?
I
Because
mean, if
that
you
would
just did the
be-
math, maybe, I would have to pull back up that spreadsheet that staff was using.
Where's the Rotary money in this equation?
We didn't factor in, I mean, yes, we have the Rotary money. The Rotary money is in a restricted fund used for this project. So that would help bring down that $800,000 that the city would be spending.
Exactly. I have no reason to believe that that wouldn't happen. My
No,
goodness, they've been
yeah.
waiting long enough to donate the money.
Well, I'd like to say, I was on the initial meetings with the high school kids that said, we need to redo Bell's Park. We need a place for high school kids to go, something of a with a facility that they could call their own, and amenities other than the, toddler stuff that's there today. And that was, well, the young people that were on that committee now have graduated from college, I'm sure.
Yeah, close.
But I see this coming to fruition now. Many of the things that we've asked for are included in this. We're getting the facility, we're getting the courts rebuilt. If we have had the issue with the sprinkler system for the ball fields, and I'm sure that can be, if it's in there, it should be taken out. But we have 9 months between the beginning of the building in '23 to the completion of the facility, the warming facility in the second phase. So I see we're getting finally what we've asked for. The vast majority of what we have talked about is included. So good for us. And the concern I have is that, and one of the things we've done is we added playground equipment to Clear Lake Park. So that happened last year. So we have done some things with other parks. But I'm concerned that with what I saw when I did my portion of the survey of the parks, that we have stuff in disrepair that needs to be addressed, and are we gonna have the money for that? But I think this plan gets us where we wanna go, and it may not be in the exact order, but what you've described to me makes sense for how we get there. So, to me, I like the plan.
If I might just clarify again for the record, staff acknowledges that our parks, a lot of our parks, I won't say all of them, are in need of maintenance. Much of the park dedication fund is restricted. We cannot use it for maintenance. We cannot use it for the simple swapping out of equipment. That is illegal. We can use it on Belts Park because Belts Park is a full reconstruction of the site. It's not maintenance. I think that this is a showcase development for the community. We are going through the master plan right now, and we've heard in the past that much of the community looks at Belts Park as a community park and not just a neighborhood park. And this is kind of really putting our money where our mouth is, right? Or, yeah, I think that's the phrase. When it comes to maintenance, that's where I think we as a commission and staff, and Councilman Member Bystrom can also attest, need to advocate in the community and to our council that a $50,000 contribution to a park dedication fund or to the park system annually is insufficient. The master plan that you're gonna start seeing coming up in the next month or so really starts to highlight how the city is in comparison to national standards, and we have included in their administration metrics how much tax dollars per capita, and we are woefully underfunded compared to the national average. I want to say the national average is $115 per capita, and this year, when we put $450,000 into the park dedication fund, we met that national average, but beyond that, we were always exceptionally, I mean, not even like less than 10% of what the national average is. So I think one thing just to keep in mind to the commission, and we'll touch base on this just a little bit in staff updates, is that after the master plan is done, staff intends to kind of go through a very comprehensive asset management review to develop a capital improvement plan to really start scheduling out how do we fund the replacement, the maintenance, that ongoing expenditures. But I think looking at that stuff differently than park full redevelopment or new park development would be, I would encourage you to kind of really consider those very separate activities. It's been a long time since I think we've done a full park redevelopment or a park, development, maybe the little park in Lakeside. There was a playground there before, but.
I agree with all that, but I go right back to, and I like the idea. All of us have to be glad that it's finally gonna be
Yeah,
done. And
absolutely.
before I die, that's what
Absolutely.
my goal is.
Well, we're not done yet, so.
And so I want to make sure that people who have donated this community thing, you know, that their money is used. And if we could use that money to get our priorities back to the way the community asked in the first place and that we all at one time agreed. You said now you could use that money for part of the 800,000. So, you know, I get all mixed up on why we don't use the money that we have to do the things that we wanted to do. And I've been on this park long enough to know we didn't have anything, but we got a lot more done, it seemed. And that's confusing to me because now we're also worried when we have money, cash, that we don't have any money. So there again, I go back to, I would like to see the budget updates. I don't know that that'd be, I'm not asking for a full budget, that would be a tough thing to do. But just a general, here's the park, lakes and trails, maybe they don't even have it anymore. It was under the park board. When it was just park board, we had a budget every month. This is how much the maintenance costs. This is how much we have in the park education. This is what we want to do, and we could decide as a group what we wanted to do. Life was good. But now, I don't know, you know, getting back to your idea, if it's going to be done, hey, we're all happy.
Yes.
But why, again, does it have to be done in a way that we didn't require or we didn't ask for in the first place, nor did the community, nor did the kids that put it together? So is it enough of a deal that we're going to say the staff looked at it and this is a better idea? Because we talked about doing that park, that tennis court from all the way back. We fixed it how many times? That isn't a good idea to keep fixing it. So I thought that was part of the initial discussion. And now all of a sudden, we don't have that money to do it the way that we thought we'd do it in the first place. So if I have to bend and do it this way, I'm just going to be glad it's done. But I think there's some pieces in there that we could have looked at differently and certainly taken the response from the commission. I don't know who's set up here, what are we here for otherwise? Because we represent a lot of the community amongst us. We're not all the same family. So that's just my 2 cents. I'm going to fight for the budget, and I'll listen to the rest of the questions around here. I'm glad the fence is going to go back up. That was a question.
The fence was one of the keys, the irrigation was one of the keys. We also, I mean, just remember, when this is done, if nothing changes, we have $120,000, and that doesn't include maintenance. And we can lobby all we want for the master plan. I have to ask city council, this was a priority for city, parks were a priority for city council. It was put into the city's strategic plan, but it has not been an investment. So I just think it gives me heartburn to spend $2 million at an economic time that we are in right now. But besides that, if nothing changes, we have $120,000 when this is said and done to maintain all of the parks. And
Does that include the 225,000 that we're assuming? And, you know, we might be in a hard recession time right now, but life is not going to be over. So
No.
that we're going to continue to put money into that park dedication fund.
I
It
guess-
would not include that, and just if I can clarify for the record, looking at that fund balance year over year over the next 10 years, that fund balance continues to grow back up
Right.
some.
Right.
it continues to grow, yes.
I guess my comment is since I've been on the Parks Commission for a while, and we've always had to take money in lieu of land because we could never afford anything. And it's always been that way. And then I hear you talking about the new parks that we're gonna get. Well, we can't sustain the parks that we have. But, I mean, I hate to say this, but you see new vehicles coming through for the city, and it's time for the parks to get updated. There's land that's sitting just empty that we can't use because we don't have the funds. And
I think that just segues into a good point, as we'll provide an update later in the meeting on the master plan updates. The city has capital improvement projects that have been on the list for a while, with park dedication previously being our only funding source. So lights at Fenway, we've had the Belts project. So year after year, capital projects haven't changed per se. We've had the same ones on the list. However, I think that trend is shifting a little bit, or the Parks Commission can certainly at any time make any recommendations to council on funding or whatnot, but as part of the master plan updates is really building out a 10-year capital plan and aligning resources with that. So on an annual basis, we will know what is on the capital plan and how that's going to be funded. And some of that might be park dedication funds, and some may be, requests to consider or recommend consideration of tax levy dollars if we need to for a certain project. So I think as we get into some of these planning phases and build out a really strong 10-year capital plan, getting our parks on a replacement cycle, building in budget for master plans, because some of our parks will require a master plan. Fenway Fields, for example, how are we gonna expand that? So until we can really get that built out, we built a skeleton for now, but we're gonna need to continually look at that annually and really build out a more detailed plan as we move forward. So we can't predict the future. I know we're in the here and the now of here's what our fund balances are and this is the impact on the budget for this particular project. We also can seek out additional sponsors, grants, other funding opportunities to help with this particular project to keep more money in our park dedication fund. I think that's an opportunity for the staff and Parks Commission and the city. And then there's always the variable of what we will get for park dedication, potential increases in tax levy dollars for parks in future years. We don't know what that will be, but there is that opportunity moving forward. So I know it is hard to, you want to remain solvent with the budget and have some plans in place. And I really do feel that's going to start flushing out in the next 1 to 2 years as we build this out and start having a more succinct plan as part of our master plan update. So
That's kind of confusing to me that we went to which phase can we do first to all the other parks, and it gets mixed up, because right now I'm just looking at this one.
well-
And I'm looking at the grant, when you said if we get the grant, we're gonna have enough to do what we thought we were gonna do. And now all of a sudden, it's changed. So I wanna concentrate on this one. Is there no other way, and listening to my commissioner friends here, that you can see that we can still do that building first?
I mean, I'd have to defer to the expertise in place. Coming from a construction background, I understand how planning works in that. Looking at the site, I understand why you would want to tackle that back corner first. Seems to make sense from that area. It's really helpful also to know that as far as the parkland dedication fee, that's not available for maintenance or these other items that we've been discussing. We've had a balance there for years that we have spent hardly anything out of. I don't think it's in our best interest to keep this kitty in the background. In all honesty, it's not what it's for. It's there for improvements, or new builds, as it were. So all in all, yes, I think there's some things that, in the details, that we should really flush out. The irrigation, obviously, to reiterate that again, fencing and that, as long as it's going back in. But overall, from the phasing plan, Karen, I would have to defer to the expert, because yes, we all talked about the phasing, what we'd like to see first, but we have zero, collective, I may have the most in construction, maybe not, I don't know everyone that well, but we're not experts in construction phasing, so they definitely have to defer to experts on that.
If
Well, I
I could just,
appreciate that.
kind of one overall comment on the belt, because I agree. This is what we've been looking for, and so there's not an issue with that. Maybe maybe a recommendation for future. We haven't met for months. A lot of work has been going on for months that so we weren't brought along. And there's something to be said for bringing people along to understand the construction needs, to understand. Then I think we could have looked at this and just gone, oh, I get it. But what we did is we didn't know any of that. And we look at this and we go, they just disregarded not everything. They disregarded some key things that we recommend. So why are we here? So future,
Sure.
take it or leave it, but there's something to be said for, even if we don't have decisions to make some month, if we meet for a half hour, 45 minutes, and you just bring us along, I think then we all can work together a lot better.
This has been that's been the issue we've talked about over and over again, is communication. And that's where we break down. and we have the issues. And the other part of it is I would like to know what we can expect our role to be, which you hear me say all the time, what's our role in the, but what can we expect our role to be in this going forward? Like, is the remainder of this stuff gonna go before council first and then go backwards to us? Or is it gonna come to us and we're gonna be able to make a recommendation? What is our role and what are you expecting out of us on this going forward? So that
On
we're all,
belts specifically?
on belts.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean,
Do you mind if I?
Yeah.
I think
We've
with
asked-
belts tonight, we're looking to see if this body make a recommendation on the phasing plan that is before you. You are an advisory body, so we'd bring that to the city council. Beyond that, I think when it comes down to the actual, when things start moving, I wouldn't imagine that this commission would have a whole lot of involvement in development. If we're talking about, do we like this playground set better than this one, or this color scheme better than this one, we definitely would come back to this body, but really this would start the process in which we would start developing that park. And once we start actually developing the park, it's not really appropriate necessarily for the commission to be involved. That's where staff definitely will take that lead. I agree with you, Commissioner Chair Steenblock. The communication has been poor. I'll say that I will take a lot of blame that in that when this was presented to me, I saw the two-phase. This commission said there's 2 phases. You're an advisory body. I went to the council and said, all right, well, we're looking at it. We don't have money to do 2 phases. Breaking it out into 3 was what was proposed. I think that there are a lot of things about the Belts Park redevelopment, and this might be easy for still somewhat of an outsider to come and say, we might want to do it differently in the future. And so I think that this gives us an opportunity to really look at, as we start to prepare for capital improvement planning, park redevelopment, master planning, how do we do it in a succinct manner in a way that everyone feels included, everyone is heard, feels heard when we're done, and that we're actually moving at good pace to have a strong park system, to redevelop it, to be what it is, be what you want it to be. So.
I move that we accept the staff's recommendation for the 3 phases. No irrigation system on the ball field. And the fence,
Can
having a fence installed around the street side of the park.
I second.
so we have a motion and a second. Do we have any discussion?
I just have one other, I'd like to see if we can reuse the bleachers and the garbage cans. That stuff, we don't need to spend more money on. Those can go back in.
And maybe a notice of what they're gonna do with the playground equipment that they're taking out.
What did we end up doing for the church?
They took it, I don't know.
You mean with the parking agreement? We still have yet to align that parking agreement. Before construction commences, you'll end up seeing something, making a recommendation on the agreement. We are working on that. We had a few hiccups with discussions with our legal team on that one, so.
And a real hiccup, waiting to get that thing settled.
Yeah.
These are things that the community look, and I'm sorry, it's probably off the motion, but these are things that the community look at is why it takes so long? Why can't we just get some communication going and get the darn thing done? Oh, that's a little off record. I have no discussion on this
We have a
thing.
motion and a second. Do we have any more discussion on this one? Hearing no discussion, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Aye.
Aye.
Abstain? All right, motion carries. So we have the bench dedication program is next.
Earlier this year, we brought to you a refinement or a notice that we wanted to review the bench dedication policy to just make it a little bit more equitable and sustainable going forward in the long run. Currently, the bench dedication program doesn't actually provide any amenity to the city other than just the plaque on a city-installed bench. So what staff has done has drafted a program for your consideration of a recommendation that would allow a donor to purchase or provide the cost to the city for the city to purchase a bench, pour a new concrete slab, and that then they would provide us with a plaque that would be put on the bench. We've determined that these potentially eligible tax contributions would be valid for a period of 15 years. And as per the guidance of the commission, we've drafted requirements that would tailor the donation term to align with the standard useful life of a bench, which would be 15 years. Consider how to manage existing dedications, which we would have provisions for rededication, and that are aligned with, I wrote that, aligned with standard useful life. In essence, the program would allow a donor to pay a fee, the city would install the bench, and the bench would remain for 15 years. At the end of that 15-year term, we would need to replace that bench. We would contact the donor to see if they'd be interested in putting in a new bench, redonating a new bench. It's a program that's really designed to help create some sustainability in the program. Some of our benches need to be replaced. It's also a program that could be expanded to include things like tables or trash cans or whatever it may be in the future. But really, it's designed to help offset some of those public costs that are associated with some very simple amenities. This is really in line with industry standards for bench dedication programs. So the recommendation tonight is you discuss the enclosed program policy and make recommendations to the city council. If you have recommendations to staff for amendments before we bring that policy in front of the council, we're more than willing to hear them and include those as part of the materials that end up getting forward to the council.
Just because I have no idea, what's like a ballpark for a bench and the concrete pad and
Sure.
I won't hold you to it, just.
Well, and right now, the bench that we've chosen is about $1,300. That does not include shipping. Concrete fluctuates. Right now, I couldn't tell you exactly how much it is, but I'd imagine a concrete slab would be a few $100s at least.
Okay.
So right there, if you're just looking at that $1,312 plus a few $100 and then adding in shipping, I think the actual program materials do say $2,000 would be there's a blank right there.
Okay.
We'd have to adopt it in our fee schedule. Staff would estimate that it would probably be about $1,750 to $2,000 for a bench.
And at the end of 15 years, the person who has dedicated that bench would get, if you can identify them, if the files haven't been lost, we would ask them if they would like to rededicate a bench. And would that result in a new bench?
Yep.
In every occasion? Okay.
It's essentially them purchasing a brand new bench and the new concrete plat. It's a rededication, redonation at that new fee rate. That is the one thing.
So I'm just curious, it says warranty is an industry-leading 20-year warranty, so why are we bringing
That would
it
just
back?
be an error. We had discussed initially the new bench we've chosen is 20.
Yes, it is 20.
Then we would adjust the policy based on the bench's warranty that's in place.
Okay.
I have a question. We didn't have a really good policy before, but we had a policy. The city does have to provide some benches, or at least should, for people to sit down on. Wasn't it before that the city had the benches and then people could put the plaque on for a certain amount of money, or did they always pay for the entire bench?
They never paid for anything.
They did pay for that. We put one out there. We did pay for the plaque.
The plaque, yes, you paid
And
for the
so
plaque.
I'm thinking, okay, so I paid for a plaque because the city provided a bench for me to sit down on. And now they can sit down and think about my mother-in-law. That's my money for the city. So now you're saying all of a sudden we're going to have to pay the whole doggone bench. And at the end, don't they own the bench then if they bought it?
No, the donation policy specifically, they are making a donation to the
So they're
city.
going to donate the whole bench and the plaque, and then at the end of 15 years, they have to donate the whole bench and the plaque again.
If they'd like to.
20 years though, right?
20
It'd be
years.
20, it would be changed to 20.
Okay, I have some question about and maybe I should bring it up now, the bench, the plaques that we did put on, although it took months more than I thought it should have. Were they grandfathered in? Did they just have to pay for the plaque, or did they have to pay for the bench that it went on? We're talking about Chelsea, and I don't know what the other one was. There were two that was requested.
They did not this year. They were both advised, though, that at the time that the benches need to be replaced, that we would filter them into the new
So
program.
this year they paid for the plaque.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
So in looking at the policy under the dedication plaque, it says that the plaque shall be ordered by the donor from a city-approved vendor upon proof review by the city. If the city is proofing it and reviewing it, can't they just submit the order for the plaque to, since you're identifying the vendor that they have to use and you're proofing it? It's kind of touch it once, be done. Can they just submit it to you and have the city order the plaque?
Probably that is something we'd have to look at. It likely would increase the cost. These plaques are typically bronze cast, and anywhere, I think, between a few $100 and $500, I think was around the cost. So,
So the 1750 and the 2000 is just for the bench.
And the concrete.
And then they are
Whoa.
ordering the plaque and paying for that separately.
it is the intent that the city would have a no net loss in the program.
I thought the
How about
the
no less
total
gain?
fee, I thought the total fee covered the plaque
I
as
did
well
too.
as the bench.
We can look into that. We certainly can. It wasn't my intention in drafting this program, but I certainly think that we can look at that and how that is administered. I think it's also just going to come down to, how much staff time it takes to administer a program like this. If we are now ordering plaques and making sure that that's a part of the step process.
I guess if you have a standard for a plaque that you want and you have a city-approved vendor and you have to look at it to approve it, it should be relatively simple to just hit submit.
Yeah, it doesn't seem to
order.
me that would add a whole lot. I mean,
Yeah.
regardless of the cost I think is going to be what it is, but
Yeah,
I'd like to see it as a one-step piece for them.
Sure.
so that they don't have to order the bench through the city and then go somewhere else. So if we could make a change to that, that would be great. And then some of the next paragraph under the dedication says that birth and death dates are not permitted. There are some existing ones that have the birth and death date. Are they grandfathered in for their 15 years, or what's gonna happen with those?
I think that's up to whether or not this commission is favorable to that approach. Some communities are very much against just including those dates as to not kind of have it maybe a somber thing. So I think it's then whether or not this commission or the council is favorable to that provision, and then I think we need to just talk about what we would do with those other remaining ones.
Well, you're not
I'm
saying
not sure.
necessarily want it, you're just asking if the existing ones, they stay, right?
I think
That's my question, is there are some right now that have a birth date and death on them. Do they stay in place, or if we adopt this policy as it is, do they get removed? Are they grandfathered in?
it's a great question. I don't have an answer. So I think it would be whether or not this commission has an opinion on the matter.
Well, I certainly wouldn't take it away from anybody who's already.
Gosh, no.
Yeah,
Right
I
at
think
Christmas time,
grandfathering the ones that are
Scrooge.
there would make sense.
I agree.
The only thing that I would say is we're not sure that the plaques that exist out there will fit on the new bench, so that might be a factor in
Oh, boy.
why they could end up changing. But we will take a look at where those exist and whether or not they would fit on this bench. Jamie, is this the same bench that we actually have in the park right now?
It's not.
Okay.
This would be a
So-
new bench, and one thing for discussion as well, this bench is highly recommended from our supplier. Public Works also commented on it as this is the preferred material that they would like to see. I do think that this is a very universal bench. It comes in many different colors and can fit many different environments. The only consideration maybe or discussion amongst the commission could be if you wanted something different at, let's just say Lakeside Memorial Park or Castlewood Golf Course or anything of that nature, if you wanted to select a different bench. But Staff thinks that this, I do think this could be a good universal bench at all park locations, so that would be something for commission consideration.
So just to clarify, the ones that have a plaque on them now, we're saying that those would not remain, they would all be pulled down, or are they grandfathered in?
They would not be grandfathered in. That at the, well, I mean, I think what I'm hearing from you, the question was, are they grandfathered? And I said, I don't have an answer. The bench itself, at the time that we're gonna need to replace it, we would be contacting those owners and see if they would like to participate in the program. If they'd like to participate, then I think we need to determine whether or not that plaque can be put on this bench.
Wow.
That's
Okay.
gonna be a challenge.
So let me just make sure I understand this, I'm sorry. So if I go out to Lakeside Memorial right now, there's several plaques on a bench. Are those, and I noticed in the policy that it said benches and existing parks along trails and in open spaces greater than 15 years old after the date of this first adoption of this policy shall be available for rededication. So if those benches out at Lakeside Memorial are 5 years old, are we saying that they will remain in place for another 15 years with the existing plaque on it? Or are
Yes.
we say, okay.
Yes.
I just want to make sure.
I will note that just for the record, and, certainly, tweak this based on tonight's conversation, and we can bring it back before making a recommendation. For those, first, just changing that 15 to 20, but for those that exist within the system, that we need to probably note that something about their useful life. Not all of those benches have a 15-year warranty or a 20-year warranty. They might have been out there for 5 years, and we may only get 8 more years out of them. So we'll need to incorporate some language about those existing benches, fine tweak that a little bit.
So if the city decides it needs a bench out in front here, and there's nobody who has asked to have a bench with a plaque, the city will put in that bench, and then can somebody come along and say, I'll put a plaque on that, I'd like to put a plaque on that? And would they pay for the whole thing, or?
Typically what I've seen with other programs, bench dedication programs range from the $2,000 to $3,000. Some communities even do add a little bit in there for, the additional cost of staff time and everything else. So I've seen about $2,000 to $3,000 per bench. And what some communities have done is they'll build an inventory of their parks where benches may be needed. So it's essentially like when you pick your seat at the movie theater on the airplane. You look at the map and say these ones are available. So we would have that for our park system, which is something we can work on, of identifying our need for park benches. And as people come forward with the request to donate a bench, we would have all of this packaged up in an order form, and they would be able to pick, which space is available. We get a lot of our requests for Lakeside Memorial Park. Well, eventually we're not gonna need any more benches there. So I would like to see it in that kind of process where here's what we have available, which park would you like, which bench location would you like, so that they're just selecting for that. I think further conversation, I don't know that we would just have individual plaques, because then that would kind of defeat the purpose of the donation to the city, and other people would be investing in that donation. So I don't know that would be recommended, but certainly something we can talk about.
So right now, the plaques are all at Lakeside Memorial. I don't think we have any at other parks that I've seen. So what would the people, because I'm back to this rededication section and the dedication and the rededication. What would the people that have plaques there be expecting? Because we don't know if they're, get back into that.
I think initially we would be looking at dedications on benches we're gonna look at the condition of them. There's some in that park that need to be replaced sooner than others. If they are not dedicated, offering those up first. It may end up being that in 2023, or whenever we get the program started, we offer 10 benches, and that's just our trial run. When it comes to the benches that have existing plaques, they can expect that at some point, the city will be contacting them, if we know who they are. I will let you know that there are some records that are harder to find. But we would make every attempt to find the donor to discuss the rededication option, and they would be eligible for that bench.
So let me
That
ask
location.
this, and I'm gonna abstain from voting on this. I have 2 plaques out there. I have 2 benches at Lakeside Memorial that are less than 5 years old that I bought plaques for.
Sure.
What can I expect?
Well, at this point, we need to amend
Because
the
I don't know.
policy.
15 years old. Okay, so if we amend this policy,
Let's say they're 15 years old. You may expect a phone call from the city.
yep, that's the easy one, right?
We need to look at that,
20 years
that
old,
language
that was.
of those that are 5 years old. I think the policy hadn't necessarily accounted for those. That is what I heard in here, you had mentioned that. And so we would need to look at those existing benches that are less than that useful life. How do we address those? So what my recommendation would be for the commission is to actually table the item, have staff work on it based on some of the discussion tonight to bring back, especially paying attention to a little bit more of that dedication plaque, and how we would treat existing benches that are kind of less than that warranty period or don't maybe have a warranty period of 15 to 20 years old.
Because this was just a discussion.
Yes, I was just
tonight.
gonna comment. I did put this as a discussion tonight for this purpose, so you guys have that first look at the policy, can do what we've done, discuss questions, go through different scenarios. We can take some of the questions from tonight, provide some further information, and bring back to our November, I think it's the 15th meeting, an updated policy then for consideration of recommendation to council.
Could I also make a comment? What is everyone's thoughts on a paver, on a brick paver? Just say in all the parks, we could dedicate a certain area to pavers. And that would be a low cost. And then they would have an opportunity to have it along, you'd be able to have more pavers than you'd be able to have benches. So I don't know, like I said, it'd be a lower cost and.
The one thing I'll note, I think it was brought up by the commission about pavers around the bench. That was actually something that we did discuss with Public Works. They did express just some maintenance concerns around them. I think if the city does, or the commission wants to explore a paver program, it would maybe be independent of this one, because it would probably need its own parameters of where are they most appropriate.
That's what I just wanted to, just
Yeah,
curious.
I think would make sense to do. I mean, I'm not opposed to a paver plan, but we've seen the pavers out at Lakeside, and
Well, I
the
think-
maintenance on them is kind of a nightmare. They are all uneven now, and
Yeah,
I
and
know
that
they do their
was,
best to fix them as they can, but it's,
I guess what I'm saying is it would be not, it would just say, there could be a spot at Lakeside, or it would just be a small spot within the grass.
Right.
So you wouldn't be walking over the pavers, because like at Lakeside, we have so much, ground keeps moving up there.
right. So you're saying like almost like a memorial garden
Like a
at each
memorial
park?
Yes, yep,
I mean, yeah, that'd
Just a
certainly
quick-
be a discussion item. for-
as a
I
discussion,
think.
that's all.
yeah, just a quick comment there. Years ago, and I think Commissioner Moorhead probably knows of this as well, there was a commemorative brick program, which lines the path down by the lake. I think the intent is starting here with the bench dedication program, further discussion and conversation to elaborate this once we get this in place, to have some other lower cost donation options. I think a tree could be anywhere from like $200 to $400 with a plaque. We could certainly look to expand other things that we might need within the community, and really could get creative on what that could look like and build on that. So starting here and getting this implemented up and running first.
Well, and just to comment that the veterans are, of course, they come and gone. I don't know what we're doing with that, but the veterans had an idea to raise the pavers up in a circular thing so that they
But
didn't
only
get.
there for the veterans.
But I'm
Yeah.
thinking maybe we could have an offshoot. If we talk to each other again, that might be something that we can have a similar thing, but in a different area.
Yeah.
But Bob and Karen Moorhead are out there if you want to go walk on a brick. a paver. That was a program at one time. You could just do that.
So I think staff has enough direction from the commission. You don't necessarily have to make any, I forgot it was a discussion. You don't have to necessarily make any motions to. Thank you.
All right, so we have the master plan update next.
All right, so let me get set up here. All right, give me 1 second here. All right. Trying to reload it because it stopped working. All right, so I'll kind of get started here on a quick, this is a discussion item tonight, just an update on our our master plan updates for parks, trails, and open spaces. So earlier this year, we received a grant from Washington County to make updates to our master plan. The intent with this is really to take a look at our existing park system and also really apply an equity lens to our park system as well. So really understand and look at some of those historically underrepresented populations. How are we meeting the needs of the community and all residents? So through this process, right now, I'll kind of run through just these slides quickly, a little presentation with some more information. So far, a lot of the work has been done through Bolton and Mank, running some analysis on demographics and populations and some mapping, which I'll go through here shortly. So at this point, a lot of the work has just been, what does our existing system look like? Better understanding that, and then I'll kind of talk through of kind of what's up and coming in our next steps in this process. So I tried to keep this pretty high level, but we'll go through this. I just wanted to start with our mission statement, again, is to develop a sustainable parks, trails, and open space system accessible to and meeting the needs of all residents of Forest Lake. So again, when we did the master plan in 2014, it was adopted by City Council in the June of 2014. It's been a guiding document. However, this is a really good opportunity to look at some of the things that have been done. So some of the goals of this process and updating is to reflect our current parks and trail system, to see what we have as parkland and our park amenities. Remove items that have been completed, so we have gotten some of the work done, some trail development, some of the kind of checklist items. We want to incorporate updates to improve access for all, so again, thinking about different populations and how can they access our parks and what barriers they may have. And then number 4 is comparing to the National Park and Recreation Standards. And really another key thing, and I talked about a little earlier, is just really developing a stronger implementation plan based on the priorities identified. So what are our action items to really just follow year after year and know what we're doing so that we have that plan in place, and I think it's gonna help better guide us as we move forward with our decisions. So our master plan is going to end up with 5 chapters. So existing conditions, we're going to go over a needs assessment, community engagement, recommendations, and implementation. So existing conditions, review and assessment, again, a lot of this was provided by Bolton and Mank through their analysis. So they just highlighted, we have 23 parks, 32 miles of trail or sidewalk. And they kind of just break that down a little bit. So here's just a quick map of, here's what we're currently working with, our existing parks and trail system. Again here, just a quick map of they're all numbered. I'm not gonna go in great detail. I think you guys know our parks pretty well. Here is a half-mile service area. So Bolton and Mank ran this to kind of show, people within about a half a mile from a park. So that kind of gives us an idea of what areas we're looking at in the community.
I just want to note too that different from our past planning documents, that these service area buffers are really just from city facilities and doesn't necessarily include things like the school district properties or churches that might have playgrounds, really showing the community's need with the community's or the city's needs with the city's resources. It's not to say that those other community amenities are not important. It's just if that church or that playground on that other piece of property goes away, we're not then counting on that to be filling in those gaps in those service areas.
And then here, similarly, this is taking it one step further when the National Park and Recreation Association really strives for a 10-minute walk shed to the park system. So this highlights that 10-minute walk to parks. So what you see highlighted is that area with the 10-minute walk to parks. So here, just kind of high level, and this is all draft format right now, things that we're looking at. But again, really looking at how do we stand currently with our existing park system and trails to the NRPA standards. So we're, again, draft mode, but really starting to look at what are the different facilities, what is the NRPA standard, how many do we have, and what does that need by 2040? So this is really going to help us to see and prioritize our community requests that come in. We get a lot of individual requests for hockey, for volleyball courts, dog parks. We get a lot of individual requests, and instead of, taking those as a one by one, hopefully the goal here is to have a plan in place and really prioritize the needs in the community and where we may need show a deficit. So again, we are going to do some peer community reviews. So we're looking at a couple other communities and trying to show, comparatively, where do we stand in Forest Lake as relates to the NRP standards and what our park system currently looks like.
How did we decide which other cities to compare against?
That's a great question. The city, we currently have about 13.
There's a number, and it kind of just depends on which division you're kind of looking at. The city uses them quite a bit in the kind of top 13 when we're looking at things in comparing to tax revenue, what are communities with very similar sized tax revenue and population and those sorts of things. Even though right now this, as Jamie indicated, this is draft, we have also asked our consultants just to look at a few other communities that might be more appropriate than maybe Anoka, Elk River, and Stillwater. That's also included in that top list.
Okay.
So yes, as Abby mentioned, this may change, or the comparative cities may change, but we are looking at that and just want to kind of show how we relate to some of our other comparable cities in the state. Community demographics, again, this was pulled from Bolton and Mank, just really wanted to pull together different data. I think one thing that really stood out, I think it might be, is it on this one?
It's in the upper left-hand corner.
Yes. So one thing that we thought was really interesting in this is that 25% of our households have one or more persons with a disability. So that's a quarter of our population. So I think that's a really interesting statistic as we really talk about access and accessibility. And as the work that we're doing, improving access and accessibility in our parks and making those investments, we have a significant population of individuals with a disability. So it's helpful information to really drive our decision-making process and prioritizing our work. And all of this information will be shared again. This is just high level tonight, so I'm gonna keep moving along. So again, mapping demographics, it's just kind of, this will be included in the plan, but just this one's on age. So it shows what percentage of the population based on age. I'm gonna go through these kind of quick, just in respect of time tonight. Income and transportation. So you kind of see up in that left quadrant there, 36%, and then the 25%. That one, Abby, was that percentage of households without a vehicle is at 25%. So up in that corner tells us, people may have a transportation challenge to get to our park system. Again, the disability, so this kind of breaks it down a little further as to where that, depending on, what disability they have, race and ethnicity.
Do you make some allowance for, you look at the area with the no car and the higher disability amount, and that we've got senior living facilities there? Do we take that? We must at least acknowledge that, right?
This is just mapping straight demographics.
Okay.
I do believe as the introduction to this section, it does, have kind of that blanket statement that each of these neighborhoods do have, maybe certain areas or factors But really what it is showing, and if you kind of just slide back through those slides again, that upper northwest corner is really an area that is income, transportation, disability. We've got a number of factors up there that are rising to the top versus some of the other neighborhoods. Now that being said, that is some of that does include Forest Lakes, some of Forest Lake's oldest neighborhoods too. So there might be some of the factors that are occurring there.
We talked a little bit about recreation demand, anticipated growth. Obviously, we know we're a growing community and plan to continue to grow. Our population is currently around 21,000. One thing, another keynote we thought was really interesting in talking among staff and with Bolton and Menk, that 6,000 workers commute into the city and work into Forest Lake. So while we have our population, you know, we have to really think about that as another factor of what's the impact on our parks and trails system if people are coming into Forest Lake. We also talked a little bit about the school district and how it's the Forest Lake area school district. People are coming into Forest Lake from other communities. So just interesting things to think about as we're talking about the impact on our parks and trails. We really go off of our population, but one could argue that we are serving more than that. Again, here's just some more mapping just to kind of help us understand as we move forward in this process and start writing recommendations and the implementation, which is coming up in our next steps. But again, just to kind of focus in on different areas and populations. So that's, again, a lot of the mapping just so we can really understand our community a little bit better, where certain populations are, and take that information as we move forward. We've also participated in some stakeholder engagement thus far. So I think most of you or some of you saw us at Arts in the Park on June 28th. We had a really large turnout. We had a QR code where they could scan and take the survey. We did have another map where they could write comments on or circle their favorite areas and destinations in the community. And then where we got the most participation were a sticker board where people could put stickers on their favorite activities, so we could really understand what the community likes. I found from that process it was really helpful to just engage in conversation with the community, and we took some notes from that as well. We've also had with this QR code that got sent out on our social media, Facebook page, things like that. So we did get 324 participants in that community survey. We have previous survey results. I think that was from like our 2019, and even through some of the Belts master plan process, we did get some information there. And then I worked on some focus group activities, trying to target different populations and groups of individuals to get different perspectives on what makes a good park, what do they like about our park system, trail system, what are their barriers to access, where do you go if you're not in Forest Lake, what are some other parks and recreation amenities you visit. So it was really helpful to take that information, again, as we write recommendations in the future here. And we did make an attempt with the renting population, had very little response from that. But I did get I got 73 responses from the Link Leaders group at the Forest Lake High School, so really good information from our teenage population. And then the Pickleball Steering Committee had a variety of backgrounds and experiences within the recreation world, so trying to really reach out to areas that would help us as we move forward. So again, this is just some key takeaways, but the dog park came up in the water feature. And playgrounds, pickleball, a lot of the walking, biking trails. A lot of people just really want places to gather and hang out, so more things to do. And some of the biggest barriers currently we are aware of, they just don't know what's available. A lot of the teenage population is their lack of time and more requests for activation and programming in our park system. So recommendations and implementation and prioritization. So this is where we're at. I know you guys really helped with, and I'll talk more in a minute here, doing the park inventories. So we've assessed our current park system. What do we currently have? What condition is it in? What needs to be replaced? We heard from the community. We're really understanding our demographics. So now Bolton and Menk is in the process of just writing some draft recommendations from all of this information. So they're gonna provide some recommendations that will be released Thursday, the 20th, and they'll be sent out to commission as well. So you have an opportunity to review all of those, add, change, modify, make suggestions on what additional you would like to see. And that will come before us in our November 15th meeting to really have conversation about those recommendations. And we didn't get to the implementation section yet, but that is also forthcoming.
So with implementation section, is that where we take into account the monies?
Yes,
So we'll prioritize and then we'll look at what we have.
correct.
Or what we project.
We will not. This is a high-level planning document, so, yeah, once we have this document in place and we look at kind of some of that asset management where we sit with some of our parks, then as we start to do our annual capital improvement planning, that's where then we'd really start digging into the budget. So this sets kind of the big umbrella, then the capital improvement plan is kind of that, how are we gonna get to the big umbrella, and that's when we look at the
They
financing
really aren't
specific.
giving us an implementation plan, they're giving us the recommendations and prioritization.
Well, the implementation isn't gonna necessarily say, replace this equipment at this park.
I'll
It's
wait till I
gonna be
see it then.
it's gonna be a higher level implementation. I think there is gonna be, when we look at this, like recommendations based on budgeting or partnerships and agreements are very, high level kind of things. I think we're gonna see a lot about just, policies and procedures and administration and how this division of the city is really, needs to move to be able to be that system that I know Chair Steenblock wants us to be.
So the recommendations, did I hear you correctly on the previous slide that, did you say next Thursday Bolton Mink is gonna publish some recommendations and they will also go to us?
The target date from Bolton Mink is this Thursday, the 20th. So if that changes on their behalf, I will let you know. But that is what we've received from communication, that by this Thursday was their goal to have some draft recommendations, and I will send that out as soon as I have that from them.
So it goes to us first, or it goes to us and the community at the same time?
Just to
Kind
you,
of
it's
quick.
not for the
Okay,
community at
okay.
this time.
All
And
right.
then our November 15th meeting, this will be an agenda
Okay,
item where
thank
we
you.
can discuss it further.
Will the November 15th meeting allow us to share our ideas from our park tours? Because we haven't had that opportunity yet. You sent that right to Bolton Mink, which is fine, but we haven't had a chance to find out what it was that we found when we went on our park tours. That's going to be forgotten, or is that going to be on November 15th?
Nope, that was sent to Bolton and Mink. They needed that information to update our inventory for our analysis of our existing system. So they have that, and this is my last slide for tonight too, is new to the master plan updates is what they're doing is they're gonna create an individual park assessment for each park. So this is kind of small to see, but it kind of takes what you got, the work we've done, we've gone out, here's what we have right now. We didn't list, I don't think, the conditions of all of them, specifically in this plan, but the intent of this is to say, okay, hopefully this is a tool for the Parks Commission moving forward. We know what we have, and then here's what we've heard. Here's some issues or opportunities. So as we're working on our capital planning, park planning, we can look at these individual park assessments and, make some determination on, okay, we need a zip line in this community. Has anyone, had any feedback on where that would like to go? We can take into consideration, these are just kind of right now, all the feedback has been kind of put here as a placeholder. But we will have an individual park assessment for each park so that it can help us guide our decision-making moving forward and where we're gonna expand our park system within the parks that we currently have.
Well, and
So
I
it's-
apologize, I have to leave, but would we be able, or maybe did you get, if you set up your correct email, did you already get this information?
No.
I would
Thursday.
appreciate if you could just send it over on, I guess I don't know which email because I haven't set up that fancy one yet and don't really like to think about doing that. So if you could get permission from someone to just send it to my email, that would be great.
Commissioner Moorhead, with all due respect, the city has requested directed us to use all city emails.
Well, that's great. Okay. Well, thank you. Sorry, I have to leave.
And Jamie, did you say that these individual park assessments that include the feedback will be part of Bolton Mink's draft here coming
Yes,
up.
correct. So this will be, I believe it's in
I think we'll get what we're looking for.
Yep, it's an attachment at the end of the plan chapters. It's attachment A, B, or C, and it'll list all the individual parks, all the feedback we've collected, existing system, just so we can, as we start building that capital plan, we can really look at what do we need for each park, and then put it on the plan, and then be moving forward. And I guess my last comment, just to really reiterate, is really the goal is to develop, like Abby mentioned, I didn't get to say it before, but this is some of the work that the Parks, Trails, and Lakes Commission established in our 2019 process of really trying to classify our work. Our recommendations are going to be built on these buckets that we've established. I think it really organizes our work. So I just wanted to make a note that this is a result of our work we did in 2019. I sent them over that whole spreadsheet of all of the feedback we got at that community open house. So we're really trying to take everything and just really get some standard processes in place. So when we, we'll know which parks need a master plan. We'll have a very detailed, like one of the recommendations could be develop a standard process for master planning. So it's very clear and outlined in what that timeline will look like. So it's gonna help us build some structure and organization, policy development moving forward. So I think one of the biggest challenges we have is those individual requests that just come in on a regular basis, and in lieu of a very detailed 10-year plan, how do we handle that? So I think annually we'll be able to really look at those individual requests and say, well, this is our plan for 2024. Where can we fit this into our park plan? And then we'll get there with.
I think I'd also jump in just around the whole budgeting issue, because this has been this has been a discussion within council. We've been trying to work on developing a 10-year plan for the city as a whole, and align budget resources to that plan. And there is a placeholder in there for parks. Yes, it was $50,000 next year. We pulled back on a lot of things, given we do not understand the impact that the property tax increases are going to have on our residents, and we didn't feel that it was reasonable to them to pile it on. So we took a step back. We really focused on kind of cost of living, increases, our contract settlements, and then a 2 to 3% increase in the cost of goods and services within the city, and that's where we landed with the budget. There's a placeholder in there for parks, and there is a commitment to parks. At least now, we have an election coming up, and we don't know what will change there, but it's, as we have these conversations and you guys express concerns, yes, it was in the strategic plan. These are the kind of actions that feed all of that and allow the city council then to be able to map out a plan to fund this work over the course of that 10 years, like they're doing with everything else. So.
Thank you, Councilmember Byström. There is a lot of that work being done right now, and that includes staffing for the whole city across that 10-year financial plan, all the needs for all departments. And this, frankly, this is a new exercise for the parks, because we haven't built out, it's been the same things on the list, and we are getting to some parks that do need to get on that replacement cycle, which was one of our strategies we identified. So I am very hopeful that we're getting there. I think we're taking the right steps to provide some really good data on our need, and I think that'll help drive some of the decisions, not only for ourselves and what we're gonna do and where we're gonna invest and what we're gonna invest in, listening to community needs, but again, also hopefully in the next couple of years, continue to advocate for funding certain projects or in general, the parks.
So are we differentiating, because of the master planning, when you look at some of the maintenance items with these parks, they should be kind of like regular maintenance things versus having to wrap them up into a master plan? Are we making that differentiation between day-to-day or kind of simple maintenance versus what should be on a master plan, and making sure that the simple, basic maintenance gets done?
Yeah, and I think we can elaborate further, take a look at any recommendations you specifically want to make or consider regarding maintenance. But maintenance, yes, there's definitely the day-to-day tasks of mowing the grass at our city parks, making sure equipment's, safe and there's no deficiencies, all the parts are there, if something's broken, it's replaced. And then as we plan for new developments, redevelopments, really need to factor in that long-term maintenance plan. There's also maintenance of athletic facilities. That's definitely different than the kind of the day-to-day, so, but we can certainly build recommendations, even if it's developing maintenance standards, park inspection plan, things of that nature.
I just know that some of those things, because I see the progress on the note here says that the commission, the review of the existing park inventory and conditions was part of that. I just don't want to see some basic maintenance get bogged down into a master plan update and be neglected.
I think
There
we
was some of
definitely
that.
recognize that there's some parks that need a master plan. There's most of our parks just need regular maintenance, regular routine, and that's part of, after this, then really getting that asset management system in place that then can fuel into the capital improvement plan. I do want to just note for the record, I double checked our schedule. It looks like the release for your review of the plan won't be until November 8th. And then when it comes down to the meeting, your November 15th meeting would review the implementation and discuss the implementation, but you wouldn't actually make any sort of recommendation possibly till December. So you've got quite a bit of time still built in for your review, your input as a process. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but I wanted to double check that.
So just one other point of clarification, and this gets back to maybe something Kathy said. I was trying to find the outcome of this, and I couldn't find it on the meeting minutes, but on the September 19th meeting, when you look at the supporting documentation there were, Patrick mentioned park positions on the video, so then I went back and looked at the supporting documentation, and there was a request for a park superintendent and maintenance worker.
There is also in programming and operations as
Okay,
well. So
Okay.
within the first maybe month or so that I was here, I was asked to develop a 10-year staffing plan. Just as a reminder, and for folks that don't know, in addition to kind of park and recreation development, also economic development, planning and zoning, code enforcement, and maybe someday building inspections. There's a lot in community development. But that 10-year plan did address not only somebody to really help with kind of the park development, park planning, kind of helping kind of keep that development schedule and review going on the internal side, but then also assistance in helping staff commissions. So somebody that can maybe be doing some of the note-taking and minutes to take some of that administrative function off of Jamie. And then also somebody to be able to help with just some more of the programming kind of events. So there are staffing proposals. The only staff proposal that's been, is currently sitting in the budget is for a community development admin. And that person would be somebody that would attend the meetings and help with some of the just basic administrative functions of this commission, just getting your packets out and doing minutes that can really free up some of Jamie's time to be doing some of this other stuff that arguably is more important. Not to say record keeping and minutes and agendas and packets for this commission aren't important, but kind of keep at a higher level.
Thank you.
Yeah, and as you, put some thought to our current system, just one last note is we are going to continue to develop and grow, and I think the whole other bucket is, those new developments, the new parkland that we can acquire, and really getting creative with different amenities in our parks and trails system as we expand and grow. What other, other community needs that we can fill. Our current park system is what it is, and a lot of them do have a playground. We don't have a lot of additional land or, room to do anything else. So that development piece and working hand in hand with Abby and the community development and economic development, they play a really strong role together. Just even today, conference that I was at, people are building, new developers are starting to build the park in that neighborhood of their development before they're even selling houses, because those houses will be more favorable to those residents and attractive to them. So there's just a really strong synergy there, and I'm looking forward to kind of getting through this master plan update and having a really solid document. It's really a tool to help us guide our decisions moving forward and across many levels. So that is where we're at with it. If you have any questions, otherwise we'll certainly get you the draft and look for your thoughts and feedback.
I think
And
the
input.
only other question I just had, is we have this whole other group then looking at the whole city redevelopment, and a huge part of that was Lakeside Memorial. So are we just putting that aside for now, and they're gonna come back with their recommendations based on what we know, or?
The downtown plan has been adopted, and it's a very, a larger area, kind of think second to second, Centennial to the river. It talks about programming efforts, improvements in Lakeside Memorial Park, and that's just kind of where it stops. I think during the planning process, it was, it's a 5-year plan, it's a 10-year plan. I would argue that that's a 20 to 30-year plan.
Okay.
That being said, that plan definitely called for more planning. As with a background in planning, I always joke that good plans just call for more planning. That plan does call for more planning, and specifically the EDA is starting to look at first quarter 2023 project to start looking at the lakefront improvements. And this commission will definitely be consulted during that process. So we're just drafting kind of that scoping document right now. I know that this body saw the potential relocation of the boat ramp. There's a lot in that plan that couldn't be done could be done if the ramp stays, if the ramp goes. So, and then also, as I was gonna mention later, just conversations we've recently had with Your Boat Club and their desire to double their footprint. So some of that is gonna be discussed and planned through 2023, including some shoreline improvements. And so it'll be kind of those chunk at a time type of thing. But Lakeside Memorial Park definitely is a park that, depending on some of those planning efforts and early activities that could happen, may end up having its own, master plan in its own someday. But we're not there right now.
Commissioner Geyer, to your point, I am providing the information from the downtown plan as it relates to activation and Lakeside Memorial Park. I am providing any of that feedback to Bolton and Meg for our master plan updates in case they need that as part of feedback that was received with.
Feedback that was received,
Correct.
but that whole.
Not the whole thing.
And it hasn't all been approved.
The
I mean,
plan
right,
has,
it's a beautiful goal.
yep, it's a beautiful
Okay.
goal. The plan has been approved. It's a beautiful goal. Nothing's been funded.
Next step was more
More
starting
planning.
to dive a little deeper, starting to understand costs and,
Yeah.
okay. All right.
So that is all I have on the master plan update. I'm happy to answer any other questions at this time. All right, if there's no other questions, I will move into our last quick discussion item tonight here. Arts in the Park Concert Series for 2023. So just as you guys know, we typically have this conversation, but it's usually in the spring, and I'm really looking to get a big head start on our concert series for 2023. At the end of this past season, commissioners were advised to send any feedback to myself regarding groups that they saw this past summer that they liked, that they'd like to see again. The goal here is to really get a final concert series lineup by the end of this year, approved at our December meeting, so that we can leverage our concert series lineup into some sponsorship opportunities for our concert series for 2023. So with that, I just wanted to at least start with a discussion tonight. We are not in a new contract with Woody McBride at this time. However, he did send over some preliminary recommendations. Just wanted to open the floor for any quick comments, discussion. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to hit that button there. Regarding a proposed lineup for 2023, and I'll just talk through this really quick here. Some of the feedback I received, obviously we've gotten our best attendance from the Johnny Cash Tribute Band and Chris Cruzy, which is proposed again for next year. So would like to hear feedback to see if that's something you guys are interested in. The Riverside Rockets, which I think you're going to be excited about. Councilmember Bystrom's been advocating for this. It's a Forest Lake former resident.
So it's Samantha Grimes.
Oh, okay, I didn't know that one.
She's a Forsyth High School graduate.
But I recommended the Riverside Rockets. I tried last year, but it just was too late in the season. So I think they're going to be a great addition to the concert series. And let's see, Ladies of the 80s, that was one we tried to get in last year as well. Just it didn't work out with budget and timeline. So I thought that was something new and different. The Sean and Ian Akamoto, they were our only rain out weather cancellation from this past year, so they would be slotted in for our 23 series lineup. The Memories, I think, was a really good feedback from this year, so a lot of requests to have them back. And I would say I think the rest are new. Samantha Grimes Band would be new, I guess the Forest Lake resident. The Our Country Gals. And the solo artist showcase, I think, is just a few different solo artists that would perform that night. And I don't believe we've had Hurricane Harold yet. So at a quick glance, just if you have any thoughts or feedback, what I'd like to do is come back to our November meeting with a more finalized schedule with some dates and budget associated with that. And like I said, I'd like to have a final adopted, approved concert series by the end of this year. So if you have any thoughts, open to any initial discussion.
Any thoughts or comments? Comments, thoughts?
No,
Okay,
No, I like it.
we need to go look some of them up.
that's what I need to do too.
Overall, you kind of feel like this seems like we're on a good direction, some new faces, some returning.
One thing is, there a kids programming or one of these for geared towards kids? Normally we do a family night type theme.
So great question. We would do 2 kids and family nights, and what we did last year is we incorporated some kid-friendly programming from about 5 to 6:30, and then we still had the band perform from 6:30 to 8:30. So we would pick those dates and select entertainment that would be family-friendly for that evening portion as well.
Okay.
So we would have 2 kid and family nights, and I would suspect the Wildlife Science Center would be back. They were really a big hit, and then incorporate some other specific kid-friendly programming.
Fair enough.
When I looked at Hurricane Harold's website, or the site that he was on, I couldn't tell is he by himself at this, or he showed him with different groups. Is he a group or is he an individual?
I believe he's an individual. I don't know the background of Hurricane Harold, but I can certainly, before our next meeting,
2
do a
hours
little
of
bit.
harmonica is a long time.
Is that what he is, harmonica?
Yeah,
Okay.
You mean for him or us?
I'm for all concerned. I don't think he can make it for 2 hours.
Glad you picked up on that, Doug.
Yeah.
If you have any other thoughts or comments, or stumble across a different group you're interested in, or any other things you'd like me to consider, you can just send that over. Otherwise, I'll kind of work on packaging this up, attach some dates and budget to this, and bring it back to our next meeting.
All right, so we're on to number 8.
Number 7.
Are you, staff updates? Sorry.
I guess I don't have any further planned staff updates this evening.
I just have a couple. The city had entered into a contract agreement with Comfort Lake Forest Lake Watershed District a number of years ago to do some shoreline restoration work, replace the aerator in Shields Lake Park. We've recently been in conversation with them about extending their shoreline work. Staff had said, yeah, go ahead, that's great. It was the exact same plan as they were doing. They just wanted to go up the stream inlet that heads to the northeast. As it turns out, the existing agreement didn't account for the storm or the stream inlet. It only accounted for the shoreland of the lake. They've asked for an amendment. Because that work was already scheduled, that amendment, and we didn't substantially think that there was any sort of change to the agreement. It's just an exhibit to show that that work will extend along the stream. Agreement amendment is scheduled for the council next week, essentially just editing that exhibit that shows that they'll be doing the work along the stream. So it's just an FYI update for you. Another one is your boat clubs. So your boat club's contract expires at the end of next month. This body does not meet before the city council can act on that agreement. There are things in that agreement that the city is not prepared to negotiate at the moment. And because your boat club has expressed an interest in expanding its footprint, staff is wanting to extend that contract for 1 full year. I understand that this is another one of those circumstances, Commissioner Geyer, where communication is really important. At this point, we're going to bring that contract, it's an agreement extension, a 1-year agreement extension to the city council, as to just keep our existing contract, our existing fees in place. There would be that 3% clause. Now, I recognize that that might be slightly underfunded than other communities, but I do believe that there's a great opportunity for a lot of dialogue with your boat club as they look at expanding, as we look at potential improvements in Lakefront Memorial Park. And we're not prepared to just open up the dialogue on all of that contract at the moment. I'm happy to talk with anybody, or that agreement at the moment. I'm happy to talk with anybody about that, but staff is recommending that the council just extend that for 1 year. I apologize that we didn't bring that back before discussion before you, but at the moment there's some concerns of opening up the dialogue on that agreement.
So you're saying keep it as it is for 1
Keep it
year.
as it
So
is.
they won't be, you're not gonna start conversations for this contract for adding additional slips?
Nope, exactly.
Correct.
We're not making any changes to the agreements before there would be any discussions about expansion and EAW and whether or not we have enough transient slips and, oh, maybe we want to have a fishing pier attached to. None of that. It really is just giving us time, them time, to really start to look at what are some of those conversations that need to be had.
I guess, I mean, we've used your boat club before, but the one thing that we don't have is we don't have enough frontage we don't have it. So that's my 2 cents. I would rather have it stay the way it is.
It's a very narrow lakeshore, and we probably hear a greater request for more transient slips, or just people that maybe live on the lake or came, put in for the day, that maybe want to boat or dock and go have lunch. So part of the conversations that we're going to have with your boat club, and as we start to look at that whole lakefront development, is how do we fit it all? Can we fit it all? And I would say that you're onto something there. And then lastly, as kind of briefly touched upon, the city council did approve or set their preliminary levy. I think it was in September, if I remember correctly. That did include a $50,000 tax contribution. So this is what I think this commission may be expecting, but I think you may have also been expecting 450/50 in the capital improvement plan. Mm-hmm. The capital improvement plan that the city council did see is a 10-year plan. That is not necessarily customary in the public sector. Usually capital improvement plans sometimes are 3 to 5 years. This is really trying to give the city council, and Councilmember Byström might be able to comment more on it, but really designed to give the council a full picture of all of the funds and what's going to happen if we nickel and dime them all, as we've maybe been doing, or if we overload one and don't account for others. We did notify that the council that even though there were, aside from Belts Park, planned activities, planned funds in years 4 through 10, that they were really just placeholders. Pardon any recreation pun, but we get a mulligan. As we've mentioned to you, after we do the master plan, we're going to turn right around, update our asset inventory, and then really start looking at that capital plan. The goal is that by budget season, so June roughly of 2023, we're in probably the best poised place, or this commission, the Parks Department division, is in the best poised place to say, okay, this is what we need. We know 10 years, we need this. And really make those requests then to the council that are really well-funded in all of the facts that kind of come behind the planning studies and whatnot. So you'll see a little bit more about that capital improvement planning in first and second quarter of 2023.
You had stepped out with Karen and I mentioned,
Here you go.
already done? I just wanted, I just think parks are important. Quality of life is important in this community. Parks are a big piece of that. And there needs to be a continued commitment and increased commitment to that work. So I won't be a part of it, but
Maybe in a different capacity. There's a vacancy on this commission, I hear. Or maybe a vacancy on this commission, I hear.
Any other staff updates? Any commissioner updates?
No.
Oh, I have to ask the question.
Probably the same one I'm gonna
The Bayview
ask.
guy, we made recommendations a couple of times that we do something for this poor man. He lost the trees, and so we said, I thought in the fall then they were gonna maybe do some plantings, and of course, nothing's happened. So I'm just feeling like maybe he and we got blown off on that one.
Do you want? So the resident next to Bayview Park has been recently in communication with the city. He has some ideas of what he'd like to see there, some draft plans that we're waiting on from him to be submitted. He understands that we just don't know what to put there. It's not a matter of if we're gonna do it or not. We, from the commission standpoint, do want to have something there, working with him on what is best suited for that park location, the soils, all of those factors. We just haven't come up with what is it that we plant there. We are gonna see what he recommends, and once we get that from him, we're gonna continue to work with him. It's been a little slower of a process, but it's not it's one of those one-off requests that we're trying to work in as we're able to and find the best solution, for that location. So is there anything further on that?
The only thing that I would say is just that, funding is a challenge, right? And so this body doesn't have money. You're an advisory body. There is money out there that you can recommend using. The matter hasn't been brought to the city council. We've advised the property owner that it wasn't budgeted this year to be doing work in that area. And so he is understanding and knows that we are working internally to try to get coordination and cooperation to get something planted. The homeowner knows that, and it is on our radar. It hasn't dropped off. This recommendation of this commission hasn't dropped off. It is just something that we're trying to navigate through in light of not having a budget for it.
So maybe in the future, when these come forward to us, we should just redirect them back to the city council meetings and the open forums at the city council meetings.
Yeah,
Because
'cause it
we don't have a
feels-
budget and we
Feels
don't
bad
have.
that we, go one way, but we clearly had no, we just don't have the power of the dollars
Yeah.
to move it forward.
Yeah,
So,
I
so are
definitely
we
think it
wasting their
can.
time by saying, come here?
Yeah, I agree. I think we should just redirect them to the city council meetings. And they can talk to him there, or we can come, I can come, the chair can come to the city council and say, this person came and we recommended this and this and this on these dates, so. It seems like it's, because we talked about this as being a replacement of, it's a maintenance issue, and it was a replacement of what was removed there, and I thought we had plenty of maintenance budget money, but.
I will say that typically we do have maintenance budget. This year we learned, it's kind of surprisingly, we had an outstanding contract that there was a clause that cost the city more than that was anticipated. It came out of the maintenance budget. So where traditionally there is maintenance funding available, this year there was not unexpectedly. We are looking at that maintenance budget and how that will kind of get used in the future. To see that maybe some of that can be kind of dedicated to maybe maintenance of the parks for equipment replacement. Those are things that we're talking about for 2020.
Is there not a maintenance item in the parks budget?
There is, yes. There is. It has been uniquely used and being reviewed of how we keep using it in the future.
Interesting. Back to Karen's point, then I definitely would like to see that
Budget?
budget and see where the money's going, because uniquely used is a very interesting
Well,
term.
so this is what I'll say. There's two separate divisions. There's a park programming budget, which is Jamie's budget. And there's a park maintenance budget that sits in Public Works. $50,000 a year of Public Works maintenance budget is all that there is when it comes to parks maintenance. Some of that funding has been used to do some beautification efforts in parks or downtown. We're reevaluating whether or not that is appropriate. Typically, then, funding that was available would be used to do things like the improvement in Clear Lake Park last year. So there's been just some challenges in where that money sits, how it gets used. And so we're reevaluating that right now. The budget is a public document, but it isn't necessarily something that is like, we can provide this data to anybody who requests it, but it's not necessarily something that you would be able to dictate how it gets spent.
No, absolutely, but understanding how it's being used would allow us to make recommendations to city council that it gets used differently.
Yeah.
It is something that, in the onset of me being on this commission, we used to get regularly, and we haven't seen one for quite some time, so.
And just to reiterate, that $50,000 in the park maintenance budget is when playground equipment breaks, that's where that's funded through. Typically in the August, September, we look at what that fund balance is for the year. We've done the Clear Lake project, we've done Bay Park, so we have had some involvement in how that can be spent. As Abby mentioned, this year, unfortunately, we don't have that due to that unforeseen expense coming out of that budget. But otherwise, that is that fund balance that we typically have some contribution or involvement in.
I guess I'm gonna ask another question regarding the Bayview thing. So that we would have saved money if they would have just trimmed the trees over at Bayview.
Yeah.
That is correct, and we are working through how we process maintenance requests. It is a little just challenging. You are a commission that oversees parks, trails, and lakes. Programming and development is in-field. Maintenance is in-house. Maintenance is in-field. When we make requests for maintenance, being specific in those requests, I think is going to be important. But it is ultimately up to our Public Works Director and the Parks Department of how they maintain something. But you are correct, it would have cost, there wouldn't be any installation necessary, additional planting costs, if those trees were still there.
So the only thing I had, and maybe we can put it on the November 15th meeting, we haven't had an update on Castlewood and the clubhouse and what's going on with that empty vacant building. And then just a recap of the golf course this year and how it did contract-wise.
Yeah, I just got an email on that yesterday, the report, so I will get that on our November 15th to put that together for you guys, Castlewood updates. Their season is closing tentatively October 30th, is what I found out yesterday, so.
Do you have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.